Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Monday, October 21st, and for the first time this season, Grace and I are coming to you after a Baylor victory over a Big 12 opponent, as the Bears made a bit of a statement, I would say, with its 59-35 victory over Texas Tech and Lubbock. And honestly, it really wasn't that close in the beginning of the fourth quarter. Things tightened up a bit late, but I guess you can say tightened up relatively speaking, because it was 52-21 at first, beginning of the fourth quarter. Ended up being 59-35. Baylor kind of took the foot off the gas, played a bunch of backups. Texas Tech still going full out, trying to score the ball, get onside kicks, calling timeouts. But man, like, it was. I know that you predicted this. You and Jack McKenzie were the only two on the Sikkim 365 staff to predict wins. You were on record early in the week saying that on the Bearcast with Craig Smoke, and I mean they came through. Now, I'm not going to give you all the credit in the world. You didn't pick 59 points, but man, you called it, and we knew that some of the areas that Baylor would have to take advantage of. And they did exactly what they needed to do. I mean, it was truly kind of like the game plan that we said, this is what they're going to have to do to win this game, and they did it. So, I mean, what are your overall thoughts on this? And we'll just kind of hash it out. Let's get through this, because I think there's a lot of fun things to talk about from this game.
I think it's always fun when you kind of make a prediction. And yes, the outcome is, it snowballs on Tech in the second half. Baylor just completely flattens the game, and it's not really close. But I think the process was the important part, right? Texas Tech's inability to get sacks, inability to get tackles for loss cost them. And it gave Sawyer Robertson time to throw the football. Now, I would say the thing that was kind of the unknown was Baylor running the ball. That was something that you couldn't have expected based on how these two teams have played in the past. And so that was a nice, pleasant surprise. And I think that is actually what lopsided the score more than anything, is because Sawyer was going to have success. I mean, he threw for 274 yards and 5 touchdowns, but I thought he might have to throw for, 330, 315, something like that to make up for their lack of a run game. And instead they ran for 255 yards and 7.7 yards per carry, which no one has done to Tech all year except for Washington State. And Washington State got 200 of those yards from a quarterback. So this really was pretty unprecedented what Baylor was able to do there. And then on the other side of the ball, again, the process was just this. Dave Aranda was given a bye week, and he came out with a very different game plan. Guys got healthy. Those guys who got healthy made an impact. And so that's kind of what I think, saw on the defensive side, was a very prepared group. And they came out ready to go. They held Taj Brooks under the number that I set for him earlier this week. He ran for 125. I thought Baylor was going to have to hold him at least under 150 to win the game. And that's what they did.
Yeah, I think that what we saw dating back to their game against Colorado, I think it gave you some hope in this game. We talked about that last week. Like, it gave you some hope in this game to say, okay, passing wise, Baylor can probably hold up if they're healthy. Like, I think that they will be fine in the secondary. They understand what they need to do, but it was running the ball. It was like, how did they stop the run, especially after what you did against Iowa State? And I want to get to all of that, but I think it's important that we start with the quarterback play, because right now, Jake Spavital, Sawyer Robertson have something with this. We've seen it kind of gradually come along. It's like, okay, you see him in the Air Force game when he's first start, kind of filling things out. They get some turnovers early, then finally get it rolling. You're like, okay, that looked pretty good, but it's Air Force. And then you go up against Colorado, and they don't throw the ball really at all in that game. 21 pass attempts. He does have a couple of passing touchdowns, some exciting things to see. But from that point on, you've seen this offensive game plan shift to throwing the football. And it was up until the bye week, that was pretty much all they were doing, was throwing the football, not running the football. And then they get out of the bye week. The passing game's still there. The rushing game picks up. You just mentioned it. And, man, like, I think if there's any opportunity to gain some help, I know Tech's not the best defensive team in the league, but when it's matching up against an opponent that you should have success against, Baylor absolutely did that. And we've seen Colorado now, another game defensively, they look pretty good. And then we know what BYU and ISU are capable of. And man, like I was just thoroughly impressed with the game plan overall, the execution, and Sawyer just continues to make plays. I mean, 21 of 32, but 4 of those incompletions came in the first 2 possessions of the game. So he was efficient, throwing 5 touchdown passes. And cool stat here is that now Baylor actually leads the league with 14 passing touchdowns against Big 12 opponents. And the next closest, I think, is 10. So you take away the Utah game, which was an extra game, and Baylor's throwing the football at a high clip, and they've already faced the best defenses in the league to this point.
Right. And yeah, Sawyer was great. I mean, just starting off with him right at the top, I mean, they gave him protection. And not only did they give him protection, they gave him a running game. And I mean, you give him those 2 things, and it's like, oh man, this offense really opens up. Now, we talked about this going into the week, and I know there was pushback from an analytics standpoint on Tech's defense, but if you're giving up 50 plus points to Abilene Christian, I don't care how many people were hurt. Like, you are probably not a very good defense. And we've seen them be, leak points to Cincinnati and to Washington State. Like, we've seen this. So it's not shocking that Baylor was able to take advantage of it. The thing that was shocking was just they didn't just take advantage. They didn't just move the football and score. They were just dominant. Yeah. I mean, they were moving them off the ball. They were doing all the things up front that you need them to do, but it really started with their ability to block, protect for Sawyer, and make him comfortable. And, truthfully, this was, again, we talked about last week. It's like they had all these road matchups in which they had to play these really tough defenses. And I think it made them significantly better. And then you go into the bye week, you try to regain some confidence, and then you come out and it's like, oh, now we're playing someone that we can actually block. Oh, now we're playing someone that's giving us a few open wide receivers occasionally, and they're not, just sitting 9 guys back because it's like you can't run the football. And so this was just that kind of different switch. And this switch you saw, Baylor was able to attack certain matchups, take advantage of Tech's just kind of porous defense and go score some points. And that's a big credit to Sawyer, but also a big credit to just the offensive environment in general. It really set him up very well.
Yeah, it did. And I think statistically, Baylor had 2 plays early. The long play, the long punt return by Josh Cameron that set them up at the 1, but then also the fumble muffed kickoff set them up perfectly. So that actually pulled back from the offensive statistics. The points were still there with the 2 touchdowns, or a field goal and a touchdown that they got on the heels of those, but they would have, at that juncture of the game, they were still going to move the football. They showed it early, even if it would have been 50 total yards. So the numbers were actually a little depleted because of those situations, but it was another opportunity to see what Baylor's well-roundedness can do. The punt returns have been there all season from Josh Cameron, and man, like, great opportunity to talk about him. Just continues to fill up the stat sheet. I mean, the punt return was one thing, which I wish you would have got the score on it, but I mean, you still get set up your offense at the 1. I felt like Tech was trying to kick away from him a little bit in that situation, and the punter just hit a line drive right at him, and that was the worst case scenario for them because he makes one guy miss, and we've seen him do it all season, really dating back to last season. He has that ability to do it. And Josh, another 3 touchdowns, 5 of the touchdowns by Sawyer Robertson go 3 to Josh, which is, think about this. He had not, and coming into the season, he had not had a touchdown in his career, but he had been pretty productive. And now he has 3 touchdowns in 1 game, is arguably Baylor's best and most consistent receiver right now, does everything well. I mean, truthfully, he's like a big jumbo tight end, a jumbo receiver, kind of small tight end. Nobody can tackle him on the first contact. Like, he's blocking guys on the perimeter. Man, like, I don't want to say like for sure that he is Baylor's best offensive non-quarterback weapon right now, but I think he has to be. I mean, he's just so reliable catching the football and everything else.
I think so as well. Now, I would say that if Baylor's going to block like this, then Bryson Washington is going to be in that conversation because he is very different than what they have at running back. That's been apparent since he stepped on the field against Air Force. And if they just give him a crease, give him a hole, he's tough. And again, you want to talk about not falling down on first contact. This is a guy that finishes runs, finishes strongs. strong. I mean, just so strong. It's great to see, and he's got speed too. So that's great. But yeah, Josh Cameron, he leads the nation in punt return yards now, which is really just phenomenal to see. And it's pretty crazy because you don't really see guys like him doing this on punt returns, where it's like he's not the fastest guy by any means, but he's not even really making guys miss from a elusiveness standpoint. It's just like he's running through arm tackles, and then he gets in the open field, and you love to see this, the punter trying to make a tackle, and he's just stiff arming him right in the face mask.
There's a great picture of that. Yeah, there's a great picture of that. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a punt returner's dream, right? You get in the open field with a punter, and you're just like, oh, perfect. And
on the sideline, I mean, the ability that he showed on that run, like he was on the sideline, and all the punter was trying to do is push him out of bounds. Like he was a half a step from the sidelines, and the punter stood no chance. Like I almost kind of felt bad, but like his job was to knock him out of bounds, and he's right there. Like you don't have to do much. And Josh just said, absolutely not. And we know how big Josh is too. I mean, 220. He looks bigger than 220, but it was extremely impressive. To your point, like. And then he gets knocked out at the one, gave him a touchdown originally. But yeah, I mean, I was thoroughly impressed. But we've seen it time and time again from him setting up the offense with short fields. Fortunately, they were able to capitalize on that particular one.
Right. And Sawyer clearly trusts Josh. Like that's become very apparent. We've talked about it. They've kind of cycled through guys. One guy will have a big game here, another guy will have a big game here. But I think Josh has probably been their most consistent receiver. I think coming into the game, it was probably between him and Hal Presley. Now Hal did catch a touchdown in this game, a very important one that kind of, it was a big one, I would say, but he wasn't targeted as much. He wasn't the focal point like Josh was. And then, Josh just, again, it's the focus, man. It's those plays where Sawyer looks to his first and second read, and then he looks in the back of the end zone, and there's Josh Cameron for a red zone touchdown. Like, those are the kind of plays that you really need guys to make, and Sawyer's opening things up for that. But Josh is just continuing to get better, and it's clear that his confidence has reached a very different level this year in this offense, and just with the freedom that they've been giving him, it's really unleashed him and been great to see.
Yeah, and one of the things, the potential concerns in this game was Texas Tech's red zone defense versus Baylor's red zone offense. I mean, zero concerns in this particular game. And now, believe it or not, in conference play only, Baylor's number 3 in scoring percentage in the red zone at 92.8%, really 92.9%. And then touchdown scoring percentage, they're number 4. So that number's gone up even more at 71%. But I mean, truthfully, like when you have a run game, but then also Sawyer's creativity whenever he's in the pocket, going through reads, finding guys open, receivers being in good spots, red zone offense to another level at this point. For that particular game, I'm going to pull it up really quick. Baylor was 6 of 6 in the red zone, 5 touchdowns, 1 field goal. I mean, you can't do it better than that against a red zone defense that had been, I think, as good as you found in the Big 12 this year.
Right. Yeah, they'd been really stingy. They weren't giving up touchdowns, but this is why we talked about the fact that they were also outside the top 100 and giving up attempts in the red zone. And so that's great, but you better get stops, because if you're allowing teams to drive up and down the field and get into positions to score, you kind of have to be perfect in those situations. And Baylor obviously made them not perfect. They did a great job in the red zone. They capitalized. Special teams were really good in the red zone. They just took full advantage of the opportunities they were given. And, truthfully, they didn't really need to, because this game was not close. I know the final score is 59-35. I guess you could say Baylor was 4 scores better. You probably could say Baylor was maybe even another touchdown better in this game, I would say, even beyond that score. It was just truly dominating and truly impressive. And the offense, obviously, scoring 59 points is really, really special stuff. And great to see Jake Spavital having a successful game plan like this, and Sora Robertson capitalizing on it. And then also the offensive line. We mentioned them a little bit, but I think we need to spend just a quick minute talking about them.
It's next on my list for sure.
Yeah. So I think this is kind of where I'm at with it. Colton Price and Campbell Barrington. We've talked about them all year long. Those are their 2 best offensive linemen and they continue to perform at a very high level. In this game, I think Campbell was third on the offensive line in pass block and third in run block. And then Colton was number 2 in pass block, and then he was number 2 in run block. But those two have kind of been their guys. Like, those performances aren't shocking from those two. But then you go look a little bit deeper and you see Ryan Lingyell in pass protection. He gets a grade of 85.1, by far the best pass protector on the day. And then his run blocking took a huge jump up and got to 65.2, which is pretty good for him compared to what he's done on the season. You look down the list a little bit more. Omar Gbedian was really good in run blocking. Not a great performance in pass blocking, but run blocking very well. And then, of course, the new addition to the starting lineup, Sidney Fugar, who's been kind of dabbling with the left tackle position over the past couple weeks, but he gets the start and he performed, I would say, admirably. I felt like in the run game, he added something. Like, he gave them this element of, okay, he's holding up fine in pass protection, but then his run blocking is nearly a 70 graded. And so you're happy with what he did. And I think this is kind of that launching point for him. I believe he'll be the starter next week as well. And he'll have a chance to, potentially run with this position. We'll see. Siraki, Gavin Byers, and Alvin Abasele also got into this game in garbage time. But I think right now Fugar is their guy at left tackle. And that was a big move they made during the bye week, transitioning him into that role.
Yeah, no, it was. They needed to figure out that left tackle position. And I want to add to this, Ron Lingyell had what I would say his best game. And I know that statistically he might have had better grades at some point, but there was a couple times on runs for him specifically that he was out leading the way. And that was really encouraging to see, because like everyone's for this particular season was like, Ryan, like, he wasn't expected to be a major contributor, but for this offense, it was kind of like going back to his roots of what he was recruited on under Larry Fedora, which seems like a long time ago now, but he was recruited in that class. Like, hey, you're going to come and play in a spread system. You're not the wide zone guy that what he was there for 3 years with, but now he's back into this scheme and he's kind of exceeding in this. And I was really encouraged to see that. But if they can lock down that left tackle position, I mean, you look at this, and I think it's kind of the trend that they're going now. I mean, Caden Siraki only had 7 snaps, where Sidney had 60. And that's, if they feel comfortable, I think it's kind of give or take. Like, you want to have something that you're really good at, but it's almost like if you have a good balance from one guy, you almost prefer to just give him all the snaps. And I think that's kind of the direction they're going in now. But yeah, I mean, that was 7.7 yards per carry. Like, pass protection had been pretty good all season, right? Like, I think it was steady. They were schematically wise. They were in a good groove. That's 2 games in a row. They haven't given up any sacks. I mean, you talk about the Iowa State game, no sacks. Texas Tech, no sacks. Which Tech doesn't rush the passer. They don't give up tackle. I mean, they don't get tackles for loss. So this was a good matchup for Baylor in that sense. But no sacks in 2 games, that's kind of been unheard of for Baylor the last couple of years. And that they can build on that. They're going to play an Oklahoma State team that is a little bit more disruptive than Texas Tech, but it's not great on the defensive front. If they can continue to build on that, you don't have to average 7.7 yards per carry, but that's a huge step in the right direction.
It absolutely is. And you're right. Their pass protection's been far better than run blocking all year long. And that was kind of what we thought, okay, they're going to have to lean into this. But clearly Mason Miller found some stuff, I think, during this bye week and got these guys in position to have some success. I also think, again, you look at some of the teams they had to play. I mean, those are really good run defenses and really good front sevens that they were facing. And then you get to play Tech and it's like, oh, well, now we're facing people that are a little more similar, a little more comparable as far as talent goes up front. And Baylor took advantage of it and really ran with it. So, yeah, I was very impressed with that. Alvin Abasele came in at left tackle and played 7 snaps, whereas Siraki was playing right tackle and he only played 7 snaps. So he's behind Barrington. But that's kind of been, the revolving door. And the simple fact is, what we've seen this year is the left tackle position has just been a really hard one for Baylor to figure out. The rest of the spots, they've been kind of just set in stone. But left tackle, they're continuing to work on. But I think Sidney Fugar really put together a very nice performance. And we'll see if he can continue this. All I know is that if he doesn't, they're going to run to one of the other 2 guys. It's been very clear. They're going to kind of ride the hot hand, I think, with that position. But I think right now, Fugar seems to be the best option right now.
Yeah, the great news about Sidney is he's a 2-year guy, so it's not like he's a 1-year transfer. He came in from South Carolina, has 2 years. If he's this guy at left tackle right now, that's a great sign for the 2025 season as well. Obviously, if everything goes well, the remainder of the season. So let's shift to the defensive side of the ball. 35 points, like you're like, that's not that great of a performance, but this was much different than the 35 points. We saw what happened at the end of the game. I think there was some frustration across the board the way that game ended. You don't want to give up those last touchdowns. And truthfully, when it was 52-21, Baylor, I mean, you kind of just expect, okay, we're going to pull everybody out, prevent injuries. But that was at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and that didn't happen. You give up more touchdowns late. But defensively, man, like they had the one long run to Taj Brooks, and we'll talk more about the run defense here in a second. But overall, like Tech just didn't have any momentum, no groove at all. There was a couple of possessions where Baron Morton found something, and then immediately it was gone. And that was really encouraging to see. And a big part of that for me, there's two ways I want to go about this. The storyline, Steve Linton, for me, like that's the obvious storyline. The second storyline is Caden Jenkins coming back and basically having his best career. I mean, not his best game of his career, but the best game of his season after the injury. And that was super encouraging to see because he struggled a little bit this year. Comes back, grades out pretty well, 73.8 overall, 6 tackles, which was really cool for a guy that, he's a cornerback, has the huge interception that really kind of nulled all the momentum that Tech had. And overall, he, for me, was kind of the linchpin for coming back across from Orlando Johnson, who has been solid all season. Now you have two guys, if he can continue to play at a high level, I mean, that's encouraging. But the good news is that he's back from injury, which I believe was a concussion. It was never confirmed by anyone, but that's kind of the idea we got from it because they never announced it officially. Usually that's the case with concussions. But I was really encouraged to see him. The storyline for me, as we mentioned, though, Steve Linton going back to Lubbock, talk about a tone setter early in the game. He was like, one, you're not going to run to my side of the ball if I'm on the field, and we're going to create havoc if you do. And he did that. I mean, he had 2 tackles for loss on like the first 3 possessions, and he had a sack later. But, man, he had to feel good. Going back to Lubbock where he played last year, couldn't really find his groove. Now he's at Baylor and is truthfully playing his best football of his career so far.
He set the tone for that defense. He absolutely did. And the other guy who you're not going to see it from grades and you're not going to see it from the film the whole game, but I think Matt Jones set the tone as well. Matt Jones was everywhere. I mean, and he was not just, bringing guys to the ground. He was hitting people. I mean, it was really fun to watch him go out there and fly around. Keaton Thomas had a huge bounce back game after what was by far his worst game of the season against Iowa State. And there were a few guys that had that, but I felt like Keaton and Matt, they rose to the occasion and they had to. Against Taj Brooks, it was going to be very important that they played well. But like you said, Steve set a tone. Jackie Marshall, Trevin Maai, those guys really played well up front. I agree with you, though. I think Caden Jenkins, seeing him come back in a matchup like this where you're having to deal with all the receivers that Tech has. I mean, they have really good receivers. I mean, Caleb Douglas and Josh Kelly, they got theirs. But I would say that Douglas was probably the only one that got his in normal time. You know what I mean? In the time that really mattered in this game, he was really the only receiver that really stepped up to the occasion. But I felt like Caden was great. Had the huge interception. He did the thing that we've been talking about all year where it's like you see the talent on this roster, but you need guys to go make the play. Go make a play. And Caden did that. And that's a guy that, Baylor said, we need to keep you this offseason. They got him, they keep him, they, whatever you want to call it, invest in him, however you want to phrase it. They decided Caden was going to be a huge part of their future. And I think that's what you're seeing. And that's what you need to see because frankly, Caden hasn't had a great year. Like this was really the first game that he really stood out and really took this defense to another level. So very happy about that. Also need to give a shout out to Carl Williams, who looked far healthier than he has all year long. I know he got attacked a little bit in the slot, but the thing of it is Baylor was kind of like, okay, keep throwing at him. Keep trying to throw at him because eventually it's not going to work. He got a few stops, also got a terrible pass interference call on him down the sideline. Just awful, not a pass interference whatsoever. And so anyways, I felt like he played really well. He looks far healthier. He was great against the run as well. He was really just kind of everywhere around the ball. And in a game like this, where you're dealing with so many receivers, dealing with a lot of, passing options, but then also recognizing you have to stop Taj Brooks, that's really difficult at that star position. And I feel like he did a good job.
Yeah, no, he did. And I know that Caleb Douglas had the 3 touchdowns, one of those later in the game. But overall, man, like I didn't watch that game when they were throwing the football. Maybe because a lot of yards was late in the game, but I never felt like that Tech was able to take advantage of anything in the secondary of throwing the football. I mean, they had their completions and they did some things, but they racked up a lot of yards late. And obviously, Barry Morton ends up with 286. 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, but 306 as a team. It had that one trick play that they ran with Jalen Conyers. But man, like I felt comfortable with the secondary in this game. I think it was just one of those kind of like almost not bend and not break, but like it was just kind of like you felt comfortable about them making plays at some point and holding up in the secondary, making Barry Morton roll out, try to make plays, throwing the ball away. And then obviously you get the Caden Jenkins interception. But the true, for me, storyline was stopping the run for the defense. And Taj Brooks, he ended up with 125 yards, but 31 of that came on 1 carry. Obviously, I mean, if you watch that play happen, just a blown assignment. Like you don't set the edge. If you set the edge, he might get 10 yards on it, but there's help coming up from the back from the safeties. And they did that the entire game except for that play. Gets 20 or 31 yards, gets the touchdown, their only rushing touchdown of the game. On that particular time, take that away, he averaged 3.9 yards per carry, and you're absolutely thrilled with that. Obviously, the yardage per carry is up because of 31 yards, but that was just impressive in general. They were much more athletic across the front than Texas Tech was on their offensive line. There was every guy was rarely ever fully blocked, and they just made plays. I mean, tackles for loss, they had them. They had sacks, obviously, but truly it was just making and being disruptive with their front. Steve Linton leading the way.
Right. And that Taj Brooks run, Colt, you might have to help me out here, but it looked very familiar. Did Taj Brooks do that was it the exact same situation last year? Did he have a touchdown like that? I know the Texas game last year was the Jonathan Brooks one that was basically the exact same situation. It was a run right up the middle, I think on 4th and 1, and he just bounces outside and it's a touchdown. I can't remember if Taj had one, but it just felt like so familiar to me. And I'm just like,
he had a 1 touchdown last year for 24 yards. Let me look back really quick. But yeah, it did. I mean, it was just like one of those, like he kind of dips inside and then busts it out. Let's see if I could find it. Was it?
And I mean, you knew he was kind of going to get his, but
yeah, no, but they did a good job on him. I mean, it was just, everything was tough and physical, and he's usually the one that's tough and physical. That's usually how he plays, and then he's able to kind of wear you down and bust one out. But Baylor was a team that brought to him over. Everything was downhill. Everything was down. You mentioned Matt Jones. He had a tackle early on him on a 3rd down play, I believe it was. Steve Linton did as well, but they just both stuffed him. And Matt ended up with 5 stops, which is basically a no gain play. Even if it wasn't a tackle for loss, it's basically no gain, no success. Against them. That's kind of like that's his second Air Force. He had 9, put it in perspective. So to have 5 against Texas Tech was really impressive for him.
It was. And I think another kind of important quality with this game is, you try to look at this game and see, does this translate to other games? And so when you kind of look at it and go, okay, Taj Brooks, focal point of an offense, can Baylor find a way to slow that part of an offense down? And they did. And they're going to have to see Ollie Gordon later this year. They're going to have to see Devin Neal later this year. They're going to have to see, Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson at West Virginia as well in their run game. And so I think this was just good to see, right? The run game, the run defense get back on track. They knew what they had to do. There was a task at hand. They knew the problem that was there, and they took care of that problem for the most part. They didn't allow Taj Brooks to beat them at all. Taj had a fine game, but if you go look at kind of, if Baylor probably had expectations for this game, this probably fell right in line with that. 25 for 125. Okay. That's a good game, but we're fine with that. He's not killing us. And that's, I think, what the game plan was. And I was very happy to see that. And then in coverage, you also have to look at it as, okay, so what does this mean going forward? Because you're going to have a really tough test with TCU coming up in a couple of weeks, throwing the football. You kind of feel like Alan Bowman's probably going to have to throw it a lot. Garrett Green's going to throw it a lot when you play them. Jalen Daniels also. And so there's a lot of these different challenges. And I just feel like this game kind of sets a blueprint of, maybe who Baylor could be going forward, or at least what game plans might be from Dave Aranda. And I think it's just, again, reassuring to see, okay, Dave Aranda gets a bye week, gets this time to come up with a game plan, and comes out with just a phenomenal game plan in which he really, I know the offense scored 59 points, but the defensive physicality and the way that they kind of shut down Baron Morton and shut down Taj Brooks was also very, very impressive.
Yeah, it was. And I don't know I haven't looked at the breakouts of it, but I don't know on those 2 scoring drives they had late to make it 30, 59, 35, how many yards came in those particular situations, passing, obviously 14 points of that was there. But if you take those away, I'm sure that the advanced analytics kind of account for that. Yeah. So we'll see as those things begin to come out from the week and how they look. But yeah, to your point, I mean, Arizona State held Taj to 27 carries for 117, but a guy like that that's going to get 25 carries a game for 125 yards, 5 yards a carry. This isn't like what Bryson Washington did. He wasn't getting 10 yards a carry and the team getting 7.7. And you're fine with that. You're kind of like, all right, look, we're going to shut you down. You might have a long run, but we're going to shut you down the majority of the other time. And that's what they did against Taj Brooks. And after that game last year, I mean, that he just kind of did whatever he wanted to. They couldn't tackle him. They couldn't fill gaps. He was busting everything. I mean, it seemed like he had 15 carries of 10 plus yards in that game. I don't remember exactly what his numbers were, but very good job by the defensive front there. But overall, man, like I think the easiest way to wrap this up was Dave Aranda still has this team. Like they are still playing hard for him. Jake Spavital's offense is continuing to take steps. And we knew that, like, if you had any expectations for this offense to be world beaters at the beginning of the year, but they come in after, you're going to be disappointed. That's what I meant to say. You're going to be disappointed to an extent. Give them a bye week in the middle of the season, come into a team that doesn't have as good of a defense as you've been facing. This is the kind of the performance that you're looking for. And now you have 2 games and another bye week. By the end of the year, you're probably going to feel even better than what you've seen. You're facing defenses that aren't nearly as good. And I think you have to be encouraged overall about what Dave Aranda did in terms of adjustments and what the offense continues to grow and look like at this juncture of the season.
Definitely hasn't lost the team, and that's a credit. And that's something that I think we've been pretty consistent on. And I think it was very clear, in this Texas Tech game, like this team was ready for this game. And this team was the hungrier team, which not surprising to me at all. Dave Aranda has kept that locker room bought in. And I think mostly what you hear from Baylor players or what we've heard all year is, essentially we're better than our record shows. We're better than how these outcomes have been. We're more talented than how these outcomes have been. And so you finally saw that kind of switch, right? Where, oh, wow, okay, maybe they are really talented. And it's like, well, you should have seen this coming, because it's one of those things where it's like they've had to play really good teams and they've had to go on the road a lot in a few of those matchups. And yes, they've been inconsistent. Yes, they've had moments where they just flat out did not show up, or for whether it's for a quarter or for a half, like in the Iowa State game, or a quarter in the BYU game, or a play against Colorado, and it costs you. I understand all that. But also it's like, well, but they still scored 31 points at Colorado. They still really were about even with Iowa State in Ames in the first half, especially when you look at the offense moving the ball against a top 10 defense. You look at the Utah game, well, Baylor didn't start their starting quarterback, and Utah had Cam Rising for a half and got down early. So there's just a lot of factors involved in this. But I think in general, when you and I talked about this, it's mainly just if you look at the schedule they faced before this stretch and then look at the schedule that they're about to face, it's very clear that there are going to be some opportunities here for Baylor to continue to build on the success they just had in Lubbock. I know the SP Plus rankings came out, and there's, again, just a lot of winnable matchups kind of when you go through it. And I think that's really important to mention. I mean, so what they have left, Baylor's currently number 55 in SP Plus. That's where they're at right now. SP Plus isn't the only metric that matters, but it does an okay job, I would say. Oklahoma State's at number 56. TCU's number 38, which I think's a little high. West Virginia is now at 61. Houston is all the way down at 86, and then Kansas at 43, which again, I think that's a little bit high as well. But you kind of get an idea of, oh, wow, there's a lot of flawed teams on the schedule. Baylor has 3 home games during this stretch, and one of their road games is against clearly the worst team probably in the Big 12. Definitely, I think we would say Houston's the worst team in the Big 12, and that's one of their road games. So plenty of opportunities here for Baylor, but I think this one in particular showed this team is bought in, and also this team's getting better. And I think those two things are very, very important.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers for the back half of the schedule. Obviously, we know that Oklahoma State struggled, Kansas has struggled compared to what they're expected to do. But if you look at the first 3 league games, excluding Utah, which wasn't a league game, and I tweeted this out yesterday, and I haven't been tweeting much just because there's nothing really good to tweet about, right? So after the game like that, you want to tweet more. But the Colorado, BYU, and Iowa State now combined 19-2 overall, and in Big 12 play 11-1. That's with Colorado kind of being a fringe top 25. I don't know what the votes they got, but they've played Kansas State down to the wire, who's a top 15 team. Now they're 5-2 overall, and then the crazy wins by BYU and Iowa State. They're both undefeated still. So you look at what Baylor has done. You're like, man, that sucks. But they're literally 2 coin flip games away between BYU. Just say you split those 2 games, and you're looking at a 4-3 record. Much different vibes after the Tech game if you win that game. If you win both of them, much different vibes. But the back half of the schedule completely flipped. TCU, for instance, has won some games they probably shouldn't have won. If you look at that game against Utah, is just a shell of what Baylor faced, in my opinion. Watching those games. Obviously, Andy Ludwig resigns after their most recent game. Their offensive coordinator's resigned. He's been there forever. There's something going on at Utah that they're having to get fixed. So that's the whole back half of the schedule. Garrett Green could be out for extended time. I don't know if you saw that or not for West Virginia. He got hurt, and Marchiol came in. So there's so many unknowns. And throw in the fact that Baylor has 3 home games. The Houston game should be a home game for Baylor fans. Baylor fans should go to that game in droves. It should be a pretty good atmosphere for Baylor fans. It sets up, man. And it sets up for the rest of the season. It sets up for momentum. And I had someone text me after the game and ask, or just say to the point, Baylor can't relax. One, I don't see any way Baylor relaxes. I feel like this game is going to fuel them to say, hey, we didn't have this confidence before. Now we have a confidence that we didn't have, but we're going to stay and remain focused. I'm anxious to see the Oklahoma State game, because if Baylor can come out and play well, Oklahoma State could just say, okay, we're kind of backing off. They're starting the quarterback that they started to replace Alan Bowman gets hurt in that game, probably broke his collarbone. He's going to be out for a little while. So there's just so many things that just kind of stack up into Baylor's favor that did not stack up in the first half of the year. But yeah, I know it's a lot of rambling, but I think it just sets up really well for Baylor to get back on track at this point of the season.
It does. And, we're going to talk about this reoccurring theme all week. It's, okay, Baylor got right on the scoreboard. Baylor put together 4 quarters. Baylor went on the road, took care of business. Now, can you win in front of your home fans?
Yep,
it's been
a while.
It's been a test in Big 12 play. Their last home win was that Kansas game, right, in 2022. That's their last home Big 12 win. That is a long time ago, and didn't win a single one last year. Their only home win last year was against Long Island. This year, Tarleton State and Air Force. You got to find ways to win at home, utilize the crowd momentum, and what should be a pretty good environment. I'd be pretty disappointed if it's not. I mean, it's homecoming. You got the 2:30 kickoff instead of the 11 a.m. one. Have an opportunity against a team that's really you've kind of been up and down against. It feels like with Oklahoma State, it's some good highs and then some moments where you just got completely blown out. So there's kind of just this pendulum there, but they seem like a team that's kind of might be ready to break a little bit. And so again, it's a great opportunity. Baylor going forward doesn't face another top 54 defense in the country, according to SP Plus metrics on the defensive side. And I mean, if you want to kind of look around like, oh, well, what does that mean? Well, in games where they've gotten to play teams outside the top 50, they scored 31 on Colorado. They destroyed Air Force. And then you go look at the Tarleton State game, another team they destroyed. Like when they've gotten opportunities to play teams that are rated that low, like Tech as well, where you scored 59, they've had a lot of success. And so that should be the expectation, especially in a home game. We'll talk about it more this week, but I do think, again, things are trending in the right direction. This Tech game was a game that I circled and called it a must-win. Felt that way for about 2 weeks. They took care of business, and now it feels like you have to find a way to make a bowl game, and you have to find a way to just continue to get better because the season's right in front of you.
Yeah, it starts with Oklahoma State. Obviously, homecoming game, stripe out. Baylor fans, do your part. Wear your correct color. Like, make it look good. I think that's been a struggle for a few years now, but it should be a good atmosphere. I think Baylor fans who weren't buying tickets should look at the game against Tech and say, okay, maybe I should show up, because if you have a good atmosphere, give the team a little extra juice. I mean, you're not expecting to sell out or anything like that, but give them some extra juice. And but yeah, I mean, we're slightly under 40 minutes for this one. I think that's pretty good for this particular game. A lot of things to talk about. A lot more we'll talk about this week. But for now, that's going to do it for this episode of Inside Baylor Sports. As always, thanks to all of you for listening. For Grayson Grunhafer, I'm Colt Barber. Have a great Monday, and sick 'em Bears.